Hi, Kushmeister here again, and in this video, really just an audio recording with a static background, we're going to be looking at the second of the three SWAT Kats episodes left unfinished when it was canceled in its second season. Turmoil 2, The Revenge, probably the most awkwardly titled of the three. Why not simply Turmoil, the Revenge, or Turmoil's Revenge? Oh well, whatever. Turmoil is a fan favorite, and so many SWAT Kats fans were upset that this one never got made once they learned about it. But, well, if you are a Turmoil fan, then the fact this never got finished and consequently isn't really canon, uh, when you hear how it ends, you'll probably be glad for that. As with Succubus, we know that Turmoil 2 got far enough into production that, in addition to being fully scripted, which provides the main source for my summary, it was modeled and storyboarded and had the voices recorded, but so far none of this has surfaced. We can safely assume, though, that Kath Soucie would have reprised her role as the Russian accented seductress Turmoil, and Jennifer Hale would have also returned as her faithful lieutenant, who, no, still doesn't get a name. Interestingly, although the character of Turmoil was created by Lance Falk, Turmoil 2 was written by Falk's fellow writer Glenn Leopold, who also wrote Succubus and indeed did the lion's share of the script writing for the show. He also did the next unfinished episode, The Doctors of Doom. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Like Succubus, Turmoil 2 also exhibits some minor attempts at, well, not necessarily world building, but canon welding, I guess, establishing and referencing past events. Not only do we get the return of a previous episode's primary antagonist, we also get some other goodies taken from previous episodes, including the story's main threat, as well as the return of one of the SWAT Kats' past allies, whose story was otherwise left unfinished. Given that he's a bit of what TV tropes might call a scrappy, though, whether this is a good thing or a bad thing is up to the individual. Anyway, once more, enough preamble. On with the show. Turmoil commands it. We open in Alcatraz, now apparently an all-women's prison. Turmoil and her entire surviving crew, including the lieutenant, in prison uniforms, are working out in the exercise yard. They're the talk of the town as another group of convicts, led by a big she-cat named Olga, don't understand why Turmoil is such hot stuff. Determined to assert her authority, Olga decides to pick a fight with Turmoil. A couple of female prison guards try to break up the fight, but things soon degenerate into a free-for-all prison riot. Alarms go off as Turmoil and Olga's gangs hit each other and the intervening guards with barbells as guards up on the walls fire tear gas down into the exercise yard. But it turns out Turmoil had an escape plan which the riot is providing just the right distraction for. Yep, it turns out that Olga has been working for Turmoil this entire time, creating this fight scene as a way to start a riot and keep the guards occupied. Consulting her wristwatch, Turmoil realizes that her ride should be there any second as a jet swoops in overhead. It lowers a rescue ladder, and Turmoil's lieutenant and her guards and Omega Squadron pilots clamber up ahead of their leader. Oh, that's nice of her to let her followers go ahead of her, but this nice gesture is immediately followed by a reminder of just how villainous she is. When Turmoil follows them, she makes a point of thanking Olga for her help by kicking her off when she attempts to climb up after her. What a shocking betrayal! You promised you'd get us out too, Olga protests after falling. I lied, Turmoil says. The apparently rather big jet flies off as the guards fire at it ineffectually with their laser rifles, and Olga curses Turmoil as nothing but a, quote, treacherous alley cat. And with that, Turmoil has escaped. We cut abruptly to a flying saucer thing spinning around shooting lasers everywhere. Is it an alien attack? No, it's just the SWAT Kats training using yet another one of Razor's pointlessly complicated, needlessly dangerous whatchamacallits. In this case, it's what Glenn Leopold describes as a laser saucer, but Razor refers to it as a pursuit laser. The SWAT Kats are running around a rocky terrain, evading the thing's many blasts. At first we think they're out in the desert somewhere, but it turns out they're in the reflex room from the origin of Dr. Viper, and it's made even more like the X-Men's danger room by the fact that the rocky terrain is a fake environment. They prepared to take out the laser saucer using their Glovatrixes before it takes us out, quips T-Bone, meaning there's a very real danger that this thing could actually kill them, but as Razor says, it wouldn't be a real test if there wasn't some danger. That's actually a line from Chaos and Crystal, but whatever, it applies here. What they plan to fire, we don't discover because none other than your favorite plucky little robot and mine, Cybertron, busts in through the wall, leaving a cartoon-shaped hole of himself, and destroys the thing first, prompting T-Bone to complain that they shouldn't have let Professor Hackle persuade them to take the repaired robot back. Yes, folks, Cybertron returns. Huzzah! Now, you may not like Cybertron, but I do. I thought he was cute, and I thought he kind of got a raw deal in the Deadly Pyramid, and I hated that it ended without knowing that he was going to be okay, so this confirmation that he was going to end up being okay is definitely a good thing, in my opinion. Razor placates his pal by assuring him that the robot wasn't trying to outdo them. Since he's designed to protect people, he thought he was saving them. The trio head into the hangar, where they discover Cybertron's been busy fixing the TV, which was broken apparently. Some game show host is telling the audience that they can win a lifetime supply of hairball eliminator. Ugh. The game show is interrupted by a cat's eye news broadcast with Ann Gore reporting on Turmoil's escape from Alcatraz. T-Bone is angry. Cybertron gives a, quote, questioning beep since he has no idea who Turmoil is, and Razor ribs his pal. Hey, it's your ex-girlfriend. Sensing that T-Bone dislikes what's on the screen, Cybertron turns the TV off, prompting Razor to say he wishes it really were that easy to get rid of Turmoil. T-Bone vows to bring her in, and the two wonder what she plans to do now that she's free. A question that is answered immediately in the next scene, which takes place at the NASA Space Center. A female Pumadine scientist and a foreman are supervising the installation of the mega beam from unlikely alloys. I'm assuming that the female scientist is also from unlikely alloys, although Leopold doesn't confirm or deny. They discuss how the thing works. It's designed to seal fault lines to prevent earthquakes. The foreman is skeptical. The scientist assures him that it'll work, provided they can finally get the thing into space. Saying they ought to get to a safe area before it launches, the scientist descends on an elevator as the foreman decides to give the megabeam one last check. As he does so, he notices 3 workers mucking around where they're not supposed to be. And it turns out that it's Turmoil's lieutenant and 2 Omega Squadron pilots in disguise. The lieutenant knocks him out, and then she and her companions finish what they were doing and leave. The rocket that the megabeam is on launches, but the Pumadyne scientist and Massa mission controller are horrified to discover it's not under their control. Also, even though we're left to assume that the foreman died because Turmoil's followers left him lying within the blast zone, he's described as being in the control room with the scientist and mission controller when they realize they can't control the rocket. He sure got to safety fast. Meanwhile, we're introduced to Turmoil's new base of operations, a huge cloud fortress, which, despite its name, does not seem like it's a flying base like her airship in Cry Turmoil. Turmoil is also now dressed in her old uniform with her big peaked cap and splendiferous cape. Her lieutenant, who, like the Massa foreman, sure gets places fast, reports success on their mission and that they have control over the megabeam. Turmoil orders her to target the Megakat Tower, or Megakat Towers, as the script calls it. Oh no! At Megakat Tower, the penthouse has been repaired and the building is ready to reopen. There's a big grand reopening banner over the front. How can it reopen if it never opened to begin with? Oh well, Megakat City's favorite punching bag is, quote, melted down like candle wax by a blast from the megabeam. A much different result than when the thing atomized an entire mountain in unlikely alloys. Somewhere, Mayor Manx is screaming in ultimate suffering. Okay, not really, but I'm reminded of how he needed to be carted off by paramedics after having a complete emotional breakdown when the fear train smashed into his pet skyscraper in Lance Falk's blowout script. Something that I will also cover eventually. I can only imagine what his reaction would be to this third and most complete violation of his beloved Megakat Tower would be like. I have this mental image of him falling to his knees, Charlton Heston style, screaming at the sky, "Leave it as it is, as a ruined, melted pile of catkind's hubris. Why was I so arrogant?" Turmoil going bananas with an orbital death ray and targeting buildings wouldn't play well post 9/11, I gotta say. Next up, it's old Megakat Bridge's turn. Turmoil hacks into Massa, putting her mug on all the screens in the control room, quote-unquote thanking them for the lovely satellite, vowing to use it to take revenge against Megakat City for her months in prison. As the Megakat Tower finishes melting, we do a match cut to Cybertron welding something in the hangar. He's repairing the laser saucer thing he broke earlier, after which Razor tells him he can fix the Cybertron-shaped hole in the wall he made. Geez, what is he, their slave? That game show is still going on TV, but it's interrupted by another Angora plot update as she explains what we already know. Turmoil's got the megabeam. "Crud!" cries T-Bone. "So this is what your ex-girlfriend is up to," quips Razor. They rush towards the Turbokat, vowing to kick some Turmoil tail. That's an actual line, by the way. Back in the Cloud Fortress, did she have this thing already built? Turmoil is amazed at the megabeam's power and demands it be fired again. The lieutenant targets old Megakat Bridge and gives it a good zap. It starts melting and breaks in half. A school bus full of kids happens to be driving across as this is happening, and the driver slams on the brakes. The bus skids to a halt but doesn't stop in time, going off the bridge at the edge of the split and falling down towards the water as we fade out to a commercial. But since we know Hanna-Barbera won't kill kids in this show, we know how this is going to end. As we return from the ad break, the school bus full of screaming kids is still falling. The timely arrival of the SWAT Kats saves the day. Using the mega manacles, they grab the bus out of midair. They fly the bus away to safety as the bridge continues melting. I guess all the other motorists who were using the bridge when the mega beam hit it are screwed. The SWAT Kats set the bus down on the beach to much cheering from the kiddies, and then they fly off. Somehow, Turmoil is observing all of this from her control room. I guess the mega beam's targeting scope lets them look in, and she bristles at seeing the cats responsible for putting her in prison. The lieutenant sensibly suggests killing them right then and there while they're in their sights, but Turmoil dismisses this as too easy. Besides, she says, she has, quote, other plans for T-Bone. Uh-oh. In the Massa control room, Mayor Manx, Callie, and Commander Farrell have entered. Somehow, they too are able to observe events, and Callie comments that it's lucky the SWAT Kat saved the school bus. Manx, who is taking the complete loss of the Megakat Tower surprisingly well, demands to know who's going to save the city, and Farrell says that they will, producing a, quote, code red key, insisting they launch scat missiles. He requires an identical key from Manx to perform the launch, but Manx is hesitant. However, he eventually agrees, and he and Farrell insert their keys into their slots and turn them simultaneously, causing a secret missile silo to open somewhere on the Massa property, raising the scat missiles, described as Scud-type missiles, into view. I should mention that so far this is happening with zero protest from Callie. I love the concept of the mayor and enforcer commander having what amount to doomsday defense keys, like in the beginning of war games. Although it's odd that they apparently have them on their persons at all times instead of safely locked up somewhere. Sounds like a huge security risk. And why not do this from Enforcer headquarters? Even if the missiles are launched from Massa, it seems weird that the controls to perform the launch are there and not at Enforcer HQ. And speaking of war games, Manx is fortunate that Farrell didn't quote-unquote persuade him the way the guy in that movie did. Can you just imagine Farrell pulling his sidearm and pointing it at Manx's head and going, "I insist you turn your key, Mr. Mayor." The missiles fire. Observing from the Turbo Cat in the distance, the SWAT Kats realize the steps that have been taken. Scat missiles are 20 megatons apiece, and Farrell and Manx just launched 2 of them. Of course, it fails as the mega beam just shoots them down, and that's that. With that out of the way, Turmoil does her villain thing and broadcasts another huge hologram of herself, just like she did in Cry Turmoil. And just like in that episode, she demands payment in gold to prevent further destruction. Only this time it's $50 million, and the deadline is tomorrow morning. Manx practically has a meltdown, complete with a cry of "Godfrey!" at this exorbitant price, as the Turmoil hologram further demands that the gold be delivered to her personally by T-Bone. Manx wonders what he's going to do, and Callie, being surprisingly fatalistic, advises him to pay the ransom. And hope T-Bone finds a way to stop Turmoil, she adds. She seems really tired of all the crap Megakat City has to endure every day by this point. Outside the Megakat Mint later, the enforcers load gold, whether in bags or bars isn't said, into the Turbokat. Geez, that's gonna weigh a ton. An overconfident T-Bone is reassuring Callie and Manx that he outsmarted Turmoil once and he can do it again, but Callie reminds him of the expression once bitten twice shy, meaning Turmoil will be ready for any shenanigans from him this time. Unconcerned, T-Bone assures her he'll beat Turmoil and return with all the gold. Manx says he'd better, or else he'll have to, what else, raise taxes. Who keeps electing this guy? As T-Bone settles into his seat, it seems they're not actually keeping to the deal. Turmoil insisted that T-Bone come alone, but Razor is sitting behind him. He's calculated that their adversary's base is somewhere in the mountains. Butting in, Farrell demands Manx let him blow the entire mountain up. With what? Razor says Turmoil will detect any incoming missiles or vehicles and destroy them. Manx, fearing retaliation from such an attack in the form of more melted buildings, forbids it. Callie assures Farrell that they have to trust the SWAT Kats. They have a plan. Right, guys? She asks, sounding kind of uncertain. Razor explains they're getting around the whole T-Bone needs to come alone stipulation by having him, Razor, hide aboard and hope he doesn't get found. Some plan. He mentions something about dropping in under the radar, so maybe he intends to use the cyclotron or something. Farrell says he hopes he knows what they're doing as they blast off. Callie wishes them good luck, as Manx frets over the possible loss of all the gold, while Farrell waxes philosophic with his own version of if you give a mouse a cookie. Once the blackmail starts, it never stops. Well, actually, Commander, technically it's extortion, not blackmail, but whatever. The Turbokat zooms towards the snow-covered peaks of the Megakat Mountains, which never looked particularly snowy in previous episodes. Razor, wearing a parka, is in the Bombay area of the jet. As in previous adventures, it's big enough for him to stand upright in. Think Volcanus erupts. But here it's just ridiculous, as not only is there room for him and the $50 million worth of gold and all those missiles that the Turbokat carries, but also a new vehicle called the Snowcat, which is essentially a snowmobile version of the Sandcat, so it's literally the same vehicle. Telling T-Bone to handle Turmoil until he gets there, he prepares to depart when suddenly Cybertron, having disobeyed orders to remain back at the hangar, appears in there with him. Okay, so the Turbokat's bomb bay is big enough to hold Razor, $50 million in gold, one medium-sized vehicle, the aircraft's entire complement of absurd missiles, and Cybertron, who somehow hid in there without being noticed while the enforcers were loading the gold or while Razor was prepping in there. According to my friend Erico, $50 million worth of gold in 1994 to 1995 would have been $6,123 a pound, averaging out at a total of 8,000 pounds. Meaning the Turbokat can canonically carry in excess of 8,000 pounds. Seems legit. Now, through the power of beeping and pantomime, Cybertron insists on accompanying Razor. After some discussion about whether or not his oil will freeze, the robot reveals that he's changed his own oil out with what they refer to as WD-60. Razor finally agrees to let him come along, and the two shoot out of the jet on the Snowcat in the usual fashion. Hitting the ground, they start zooming up the side of the mountain towards the Cloud Fortress at the peak. T-Bone flies into the base's hangar and lands as Turmoil practically salivates over her impending titular vengeance. As he prepares to go meet his host, T-Bone sprays Banaka, a type of breath spray, I looked it up, into his mouth to freshen his breath as though he expects to swap spit with Turmoil, who he then compares to Lorena Bobcat in a line that definitely wouldn't have made the final cut, which isn't too unusual. Having read the episode scripts for Bucky O'Hare and the Toad Wars, I found whole scenes that never made it into the final episodes. After a pointless bit of action where Razor and Cybertron leap over a big crevice on the Snowcat, we cut back to the Cloud Fortress where some of Turmoil's guards surround the Turbocat and give it the once-over, confirming that the gold is there and that T-Bone is alone. They're armed, of course, meaning this place was probably stockpiled with weapons. I'm guessing that it was Turmoil's original base that she launched her airship from, and it was likely personnel from this very base that rescued her and her crew from Alcatraz earlier, which I kind of have to assume since the script never reveals the identity of the rescue jet's pilot at the beginning. And speaking of headcannons, I'm convinced that the Scat Missiles defense system was installed after the events of When Strikes Mutilor to protect the city from alien invasion. Anyway, they take our hero and bring him before Turmoil, who seductively runs a claw tip along his cheek. "I bet you never thought we'd be seeing each other again so soon," she says. Rather than boast about how Turmoil escaped just to get back to him, T-Bone quips that she must have escaped because the food in prison was awful. He says that with all the gold she just got done forcing the city to pay her, she can buy high-class sushi for the rest of her life. Turmoil immediately reverts to the "I want you on my side" business again as her guards forcibly remove his flight helmet, but not his mask. "This time I'm going to make sure of your answer," she tells him, taking out a kind of remote control doohickey as a restraining beam zaps down and lifts T-Bone bodily up into the air to float inside of it. Think what Obi-Wan was held in by Count Dooku in Attack of the Clones, I guess, only about a decade or so first. T-Bone struggles against the beam's effects as a mechanical arm lowers the crown of obedience down onto the big SWAT Kat's head. What's a crown of obedience, you ask? Well, just like the Tri-Head, it's exactly what it sounds like, and Leopold's description of it is just as maddeningly vague. Quote, "a high-tech crown of obedience." "The crown of obedience will ensure that my word is law," Turmoil proclaims. I'm curious where she got this thing, and I have similar questions about the male flight commander uniform in her previous episode. Did she make it just for T-Bone? If so, boy, she made it fast. She's only been out of Alcatraz a few days. Did she always have it? If so, what for? She seems to inspire loyalty in her followers, so I doubt she'd need a mind control device to compel anyone to do what she wanted. But whatever, Turmoil has a mind control thing, and it basically turns T-Bone into a remote control zombie. The containment beam switches off, freeing T-Bone, who is ordered to unload the gold from the jet all by himself. In this state, he alternates between lurch-like args and ugs and pod-person-esque dialogue like, "I obey." Oh, Turmoil, you've got T-Bone under your complete control, and this is what you use him for? Menial labor that your guards could do? Oy. Outside, the Snowcat approaches the fortress. A couple of Turmoil's guards on snowmobiles attack, and we get an action sequence. Razor zooms off with the guards in pursuit, and guns on the Snowcat hit both snowmobiles before they can radio in about the intruder, causing them to go flying off of a cliff and blow up. And since Leopold doesn't describe their riders leaping to safety, I think we've got our first two definite deaths for the story. Collateral damage during the Mega Beam's attack notwithstanding, meaning Razor just intentionally killed two enemy cats. I know they're just goons for the villain, but wow, this is getting serious when Razor is actively killing other cats in combat and not just robots or monsters. Back inside, Zombie T-Bone is unloading the gold from the Turbo Cat as per his mistress's instructions. So watching big strong guys do heavy lifting really is how Turmoil gets her kicks, huh? Suddenly her lieutenant runs in with news of Razor's approach. Huh, I guess those guards did radio in before they got killed. Turmoil is indifferent, having known he would have brought Razor along somehow. She tells the lieutenant to capture Razor or kill him. Whichever is easier, she says. Apparently deciding to go for the kill option, the lieutenant dispatches the newly refurbished Omega Squadron, which turns out to consist of helicopters this time instead of jets. The script alternates between helicopter and gyrocopter instead of the more common chopper parlance that this series seems to prefer, meaning that, like the Enforcers, Turmoil's pilots are cross-trained in the use of different aircraft. 6 of these attack Razor and Cybertron. As the Snowcat heads over a bridge made out of ice over a big deep gorge, one of the copters zooms ahead of it and fires, hitting the center of the bridge. It cracks in half, dumping the Snowcat, with Razor and Cybertron still sitting on it, down into the gorge as we cut to a commercial. And just like Succubus, it seems like the ad breaks involves someone falling. Was poor Glenn Leopold running out of ideas for cliffhangers this late in the game? 5 will get you 10 that both Doctors of Doom's ad breaks also involve falling. Of course, our heroes eject off of the falling Snowcat. The vehicle continues on without them as Cybertron deploys a parasail and Razor unfurls his Delta hang glider. 4 of the, quote, snow choppers pursue them through the gorge. One of the pursuing pilots gets lucky and shoots a hole through Cybertron's parasail, and the little robot drops like a stone. Yay, more characters falling drama. Cybertron smacks into a ledge about halfway down and is the robotic version of knocked unconscious, his eyes dimming. No, Cybertron, not again. Omega Squadron gets even luckier, hitting the wings of Razor's hang glider next. He too promptly plummets, and of course the pursuing she-cats don't bother confirming the kill and fly off, taking Cybertron with them. As he falls, Razor deploys a python from his Glovatrix and saves himself from tumbling to certain doom. Bizarrely, you'd think this would be in full view of the helicopter pilots as they collect Cybertron, but I guess not. Hanging by the python, it turns out that Razor is wearing snow boots, from which climbing spikes deploy, allowing him to climb up the side of the gorge, Stallone in cliffhanger style. In Turmoil's control room, The lieutenant enters with, quote, the two snowmobile drivers. Wait, those two didn't die? Or are these different snowmobile driving guards that Leopold just forgot to mention? I call BS. This is the second time Leopold has pulled back from killing off extraneous minor characters in this script, allowing them to survive without explanation. Did he get cold feet after the corpse fest that was Succubus? The Massa foreman earlier and these two Turmoil guards just suddenly turning up alive again after they should have died feels like some meddling. Anyway, they drag in the still unconscious Cybertron and aren't quite sure what to make of him. Zombie T-Bone explains that his name is Cybertron and he was created by Professor Hackle. Completely unprompted, too. That's some mind control device Turmoil stuck on him. Deciding the little robot can be useful, Turmoil orders him to be reprogrammed and made into her obedient slave just like T-Bone. Oh no! She asks what happened to Razor. The lieutenant said he was killed. He was destroyed, Commander, is how she puts it. And Turmoil mockingly asks Zombie T-Bone what he thinks of his late partner's demise. He mindlessly replies that, he's cool with it. She decides to celebrate by extorting more money from the city. Cut to her in a video conference call with Mayor Manx in his office, demanding $100 million. The mayor protests that after practically emptying the mint, they don't have that kind of money. Turmoil isn't interested in his excuses and demands that he have the money ready at the mint so that her driver, her words, meaning the mind-controlled T-Bone, who is visible on the screen standing behind her, can pick it up. Weirdly, she doesn't threaten any consequences for failure and just ends the call. Callie, who is also present with Farrell, is aghast that T-Bone is cooperating with her and wonders what she's done to him. Farrell angrily says that Manx should have listened to him and reminds him that once you give in to an extortionist, blackmailer, it never stops. They just keep demanding more and more from you. Wise words, Commander. Back up in the mountain, Razor finishes climbing out of the gorge, and we can see the Cloud Fortress in the distance. Retracting his climbing spikes back into his boots, he now extends a pair of retractable skis and jet thrusters into his heels, and then unfurls a pair of telescoping ski poles. Man, he really came prepared. James Bond would approve. As he zooms towards the distant base, he's immediately attacked by 4 gyrocopters. He takes it in stride, grumbling, "Why am I not surprised?" There's a lengthy pursuit sequence. Razor uses his Glovatrix's extendable shield to deflect a laser blast from one of the copters. A second one attempts to flank him, so he detaches the shield and flings it at the copter like a frisbee, shattering the rotor blades. The copter crash lands in the snow. Razor then zooms into an ice tunnel with the 3 remaining copters in pursuit. Evidently they didn't see Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Although, because these are helicopters, maybe Darkman would be a better comparison. Alas, the 3 helicopters enter the tunnel safely. Leaving it safely is a different matter. Razor pulls a grenade from his Glovatrix and throws it back at them, blowing up the tunnel wall. He exits the tunnel followed by a huge gout of flame. I'd say those pilots were dead, but Glenn's already done 2 takebacks in this episode, so I don't know. Anyway, apparently Razor has finally arrived at the fortress after coming out of the tunnel, and he heads towards it. Standing outside, Turmoil talks to the mind-controlled T-Bone and reprogrammed Cybertron. She tells Cybertron to load the gold from the mint into the Turbokat once T-Bone, who she is calling her flight commander again, flies them there. This will be Megakat City's final payment, she says. Egads, does this mean she intends to destroy it afterward? Well, maybe, but she also says that she's going to start extorting money from the rest of the world using the Mega Beam, which sounds like a bad idea. I mean, yeah, sure, the giant orbital death ray of melty doom gives you an edge, but it doesn't make you invincible, and at some point the entire world might unite against you, and you can only target one thing at a time with the Mega Beam. Turmoil's repeated successors are apparently making her greedy and careless. Anyway, Cybertron gives a zombified beep of obedience. What does a zombie beep sound like? And goes into the Turbo Cat. Just then, Razor comes whooshing over a low cliff, quote, like James Bond, and lands in front of them. He uses his ski poles to hit the startled guards as he whizzes past them on his skis. Leopold is adamant that he uses the handles, not the points. The guards aim their laser rifles at him, but he uses the ski poles to smack the guns out of their hands. Noticing Zombie T-Bone, he comments about the, quote, new headgear and asks what's going on. Turmoil pulls a gun, but Razor flicks up the handle of one of his ski poles, firing a dart into her sleeve, pinning her arm against the wall. She drops the gun instead of, transferring it to her other hand, nor do the guards pick up their dropped guns, at least not yet. At least the guys in the Three Amigos were being covered by Steve Martin and forced to drop their guns after Chevy Chase pins someone's sleeve to the wall. She orders Zombie T-Bone to get Razor. Turmoil's guards finally pick their guns up as he stomps forward and grabs Razor, backhanding him into the side of the Turbo Cat. Ouch. T-Bone keeps his pimp hand strong. He declares that he only obeys Turmoil now. Poor Razor, dazed, must be getting some serious deja vu, or as T-Bone would say, deja who. Razor thinks it's an act like last time, but Zombie T-Bone fires some mini turbo blades at him, which Razor just barely dodges, realizing his friend is, quote, playing for keeps. Weirdly, to convey how close the turbo blades, now embedded in the side of the jet, came to hitting Razor, it says they sliced off 2 of his whiskers. What whiskers? Zombie Cybertron emerges from inside the bomb bay, and we get a repeat of what just happened. Razor thinks that he's encountered an ally, only to be violently given a demonstration that said ally is under the villain's control. The little robot launches a grappling cable which wraps around Razor and yanks him off his feet. As her guards approach the struggling SWAT Cat, Turmoil says that soon he'll be her mindless slave too. I guess this was the point of the capture him alive if possible option before. Will Razor end up a zombie? Razor pops a buzzsaw out of his Glovatrix and cuts himself free of the cables, which somehow causes Zombie Cybertron to go flying backward and smack against the interior of the bomb bay. As Zombie T-Bone and some guards approach, Razor kicks off his jet-powered ski boots and they go sailing, smashing into T-Bone and the She-Cats and sending them flying back. Turmoil, by the way, is apparently still pinned by her sleeve, since I can't find a mention of her having been freed. So she's like that guy in the Three Amigos, stuck by the sleeve and ignored in all the fighting. Turmoil, both angry at all of this and impressed by Razor's fighting skills, commands her guards to get Razor alive so that they can put another crown of obedience on him. And still no mention of her having gotten loose. Despite the command to take him alive, they fire at him with their lasers. Can laser guns in the SWAT Kats universe be set to stun? But of course the nimble SWAT Cat evades every shot. Despite the fact the guards are flagrantly disobeying the order to take Razor alive, Turmoil's lieutenant goes to get another crown of obedience thing as she tells T-Bone to go get his partner. He, of course, mindlessly heads off to do just that as Razor heads inside the base. Zombie T-Bone, accompanied by some of Turmoil's guards, searches around inside the building, but Razor is hiding in the air vent. He realizes everything depends on him, with both T-Bone and Cybertron controlled by Turmoil. He wants to help them, but decides he needs to take away Turmoil's control of the Mega Beam first, showing some pretty excellent pragmatism. You know, the idea that the city is more important than his friends. After the search party passes him by without checking the most obvious hiding spot in the world, Razor hops down and goes looking for the control room, encountering zombie Cybertron, who attacks him. After a brief fight, he disables the robot using a mini scrambler missile, which shorts him out. "Sorry, Cyber Buddy," Razor says sadly. He futzes with Cybertron and tries to undo whatever it was Turmoil's people did to him, as we cut to Turmoil, finally freed, in the control room with zombie T-Bone, who apparently has given up searching for Razor. I guess they're just waiting for him to come to them, since obviously the control room is where he would go. The door opens and Cybertron enters with an apparently captured Razor, who is tied up with some flexible metal cables. Ah, I see they're recycling the climax from A Bright and Shiny Future, the phony capture. Hey, if a plan works, it works. Use it again. Turmoil's lieutenant prepares to stick another one of the mind-controlled doohickeys onto Razor. "Welcome to my team," Turmoil sneers. More recycling of plot points from earlier episodes occurs here. As the lieutenant is preparing to, very slowly, stick the crown of obedience on Razor, he secretly sticks a little bomb on a control panel without them noticing. It goes off, destroying the console, and somehow doesn't fling Razor, Cybertron, and the lieutenant across the room. On a big view screen, Turmoil sees that the explosion has caused the Mega Beam to shift its orbit. She can't control it anymore. Cybertron, firmly a good guy again, punches the lieutenant, knocking her into an enraged Turmoil. Getting up, she pulls her gun, but Razor unravels the cables from himself and whips them towards her. The other end wraps around the gun barrel, and he yanks the weapon out of her hand. Turmoil has a hissy fit and orders T-Bone to kill Razor. T-Bone tackles Razor, but Razor leaps over him. Turning and firing some mini turbo blades, he accidentally hits and destroys more of Turmoil's controls, making her angrier and angrier. The lieutenant and two guards shoot at Cybertron, but he mimics Razor's earlier move by using suction cup-tipped cables to whip the guns out of the trio's hands. Meanwhile, for some reason, Turmoil losing control of the Mega Beam means it's now going to automatically fire on her fortress. I don't know either. You think it would just switch off, control reverting back to massa, but whatever. It fires directly down on the building while everyone is still in it and everything starts to melt around them. The lieutenant advises getting out while the getting's good, so the villains, zombie T-Bone among them, run out. On the way out, because we earlier saw what a jerk Turmoil is when it comes to leaving people behind, locks Razor and Cybertron in the control room to die. Razor tries to open the door, but it won't budge. "Locked!" he cries in dismay. Cybertron does his Kool-Aid Man thing that he did in the reflex room earlier, smashing through the door. "Unlocked," Razor quipped in a callback that you knew was coming. Outside, the villains are escaping. T-Bone and Turmoil are in the Turbo Cat, with the latter complaining that she's going to need a new base, considering her beloved Cloud Fortress is currently melting into so much Nickelodeon gack. They zoom off, followed by the rest of Turmoil's crew in the gyrocopter things. In space, the Mega Beam overheats and blows up because, of course, they can't simply revert control to massa and use it for its original intended noble purpose of stopping earthquakes. Oh well, this at least causes the beam to switch off with its source destroyed, leaving the Cloud Fortress only partially melted. Razor comes zooming up behind the escaping villains in a jet, probably the one used for the prison break at the beginning, and Turmoil boasts that he won't fire on the Turbo Cat with his buddy T-Bone in it. Zombie T-Bone moves around behind Razor's purloined jet as Turmoil prepares to shoot him down. She fires turbo blades, but Razor is able to dodge them. However, he realizes that the jet he's in isn't as fast as the Turbo Cat, and they'll catch him very easily. So he uses some kind of remote control thing to turn off the Turbo Cat's engines mid-flight. Understandably freaking out a bit, Turmoil demands to know WTF as Zombie T-Bone realizes Razor used the emergency remote kill switch installed in case someone ever stole the jet. You know, they sure could have used this back during Night of the Dark Cat. Maybe that incident is why they added it. T-Bone makes an emergency landing in the snow near a cliff. Contacting them over the radio, Razor demands that Turmoil surrender. Turmoil counters with a demand that he land and get out and talk to her, or else she'll order T-Bone to jump off the cliff. To prove that she's serious, she tells him to start walking towards the edge. As he does so, Razor freaks out and agrees, landing and getting out, and even though Turmoil didn't tell T-Bone to stop, he does. I guess he can intuit her desires? Whatever. Razor throws the remote control for the kill switch to the ground, offering to let her have both it and the Turbo Cat if she'll free T-Bone. But perhaps Razor shouldn't have handed it over so soon, because as soon as Turmoil picks it up, she draws her gun on Razor and prepares to shoot him. "Say goodbye to your partner, T-Bone," she sneers. "Goodbye, Razor," mindlessly repeats T-Bone over by the cliff. Suddenly, Cybertron flies out of the jet that Razor stole in one of the Omega Squadron gyrocopters. Yeah, this is definitely the really big jet used in the breakout at the beginning. And speaking of the gyrocopters, where did the other ones go? Why aren't Turmoil's followers circling back to, help her? She let them go up the rescue ladder at the beginning first. She deserves a little help here. Minions are so undependable. Cybertron fires his cable things, and once again Turmoil has her gun whipped out of her hand. Zombie T-Bone fires his mini turbo blades, which hit the copter's rotor blades, destroying them. The aircraft plummets over the edge of the cliff that T-Bone was going to jump off of, but Cybertron leaps out and grabs the edge, while T-Bone and Razor fight. While this is going on, Turmoil goes over and stomps on Cybertron's fingers, trying to make him lose his grip and fall. "Termination time, Tin Man," she snarls. "No!" Finally, Razor smashes the crown of obedience, freeing his friend from Turmoil's control. T-Bone is a little groggy and doesn't remember very much. Noticing what Turmoil is doing, he goes over and grabs her from behind, chiding her for not being very ladylike. Realizing he isn't under her control anymore, Turmoil declares she isn't going back to prison and pulls a grenade, preparing to blow herself and the SWAT Kats to bits. But T-Bone fires a turbo boomerang from his Glovatrix. It knocks the grenade from her hand and over the side of the cliff, but it still detonates. The sound of the explosion causes an avalanche which sweeps Turmoil right over the edge of the cliff to her death. I felt a great disturbance in the force, as if millions of SWAT Kats fans cried out in anger and were suddenly silenced. Dang, I didn't think they'd kill her off. Glenn Leopold didn't pull back from this death scene like he did with the others. I guess he wanted Turmoil to be the only definite death in the episode. I guess this means no comeuppance from Olga. The SWAT Kats, of course, are safe from the avalanche and extract themselves from the snow after it's over. T-Bone is a little disappointed his one-time evil lover just went bungee jumping without a bungee, to quote Ninja Turtles 3. But at the moment, they're more worried Cybertron went over the edge too, but the plucky little robot pops up from over the edge, having managed to hang on despite it all, making Turmoil's attempt to stomp on his fingers hilariously futile. He hauls himself up and rejoins the SWAT Kats, who are glad to see him. And I guess this means Turmoil's lieutenant is running the show in her late boss's gang now, since it appears that the rest of the crew got away just fine, and indeed disappeared from the story entirely after escaping the melting fortress. The end. I hope they can recover the gold from the melted remains of the Cloud Fortress, or else Manx is gonna have to raise taxes again after all, 'cause Turmoil had it unloaded from the Turbo Cat, and I'd need to double check, but they don't mention them putting it back on board when they're fleeing at the end. There was no time to anyway, meaning $50 million worth of gold was inside the building when the mega beam hit it. 'Cause, I mean, technically, although they did stop Turmoil and prevent her from continuing to use the mega beam, they never really recovered the gold. I mean, they totally failed to get the gold back, or actually capture any of the villains, considering that Turmoil dies and all of her followers escape. I mean, just imagine the post-episode scene where they return. Mission accomplished. Where's the gold? Asks Callie. Well, it still exists. You just need to go dig it out of Turmoil's melted base, says T-Bone. Manx promptly has a heart attack. What about Turmoil and her followers? The warden at Alcatraz is calling me day and night, says Farrell. Turmoil herself is, T-Bone trails off uncertainly. At the bottom of a cliff, Razor finishes for him. And her crew? Demands Farrell. They escaped, says T-Bone. Yeah, says Razor. In retrospect, we kinda only halfway succeeded. You two are in big trouble, yells Commander Farrell.